What is up, guys? I hope you're having a fantastic day. Thank you so much for clicking on the video, and welcome to... I don't think it's going to be called that, don't worry. So what do people mean when they refer to an 80s studio clean? Why does it seem like everybody loves them so much? And how can you get them with your setup? These are those super compressed, super chimey, 80s clean tones with a bunch of wide wet effects on them, used by people like Prince, Michael Landau, Dann Huff, Steve Stevens. I think we love them so much because we remember them. If you've been growing up anytime since the 80s, they haven't gone away, and it's just baked into our musical DNA. They're also very guitaristy, I would say. There's tons of high end, there's tons of punch. It's those things that we always want and we don't always get. So it's very self-indulgent and fun to play on these tones. I'm gonna show you the principles of how you can do this utilizing plugins today, but also talk about the real world setups that are used and different ways you can do it with whatever gear that you have right now. But first, I have some bad news. I've done something that I've been dreading for 30 years. I plugged in my real mic. Yeah, but you guys are worth it. To the video! 5 steps to how you get this 80s studio clean. The first one is ditch the cabinet. This is gonna sound crazy if you've never done this before, but what is a guitar cabinet? It is a massive filter. There's almost no high-end information in the guitar signals that we all know and love. But all that air, all that clickiness, the chiminess, that is what gives these cleans their sound. Picture a piezo, picture a synth that has all that up there. That is what our ears are gravitating to when we hear that, and what makes it sound so different from a normal guitar tone. Number 2, let's talk about different rigs that you can achieve this with and different ways it was done historically. You can take a rack preamp, just don't send it to a cabinet, don't send it to a power amp, record that, then you have that awesome direct sound. You can also do this with a real amp, as long as your amp is properly loaded down. That's what speakers do, they keep your amp from exploding, be very careful. You can take the line out and record that. Back in the day, reactive loads didn't exist yet. We'll get to that in a second. You could use a resistive load, which doesn't really feel right, but it doesn't respond like a real cabinet would. But that's kind of the point. These are direct feeling, these are punchy. And that would keep the amp from blowing up, and then you can record. They would also plug into an ISO cabinet in a different room or underneath the stage, just not mic it up. Then the amp is performing safely, but you can get that cool line out direct sound. Another big one back then was the Rockman. That is the Boston Tom Schultz developed little solid state unit, little box, or the rack. That's Def Leppard, that is Flesh for Fantasy. It has that chime, it has that direct feel. These are also frequently referred to as desk tones, because you would plug a guitar just directly into the recording desk, go through whatever strip is there, API, Neve, whatever, crank up the volume, get it loud enough, do a little bit of EQ. This comes from the funk world. This is the Nile Rodgers thing. In fact, you can hear this on Let's Dance with Nile Rodgers and Stevie Ray Vaughan. This is Prince. A lot of Prince tones are like this. So if you just have your audio interface, you could even just plug straight into that and apply whatever channel strips you have, and you're off to the races. Talking about what you could use right now, just about anything. We're really lucky. We have a lot of options now. So if you're a modeling guy, I have done this with Fractal, with Helix. If you're a plugin guy, that's what I'm going to show you today. I'm using a Nembrini ADA MP1 plugin, but I've done this with Neurals, like all the standard stuff that you might already have. You can do this with real amplifiers. Rev has reactive load built in for direct XLR out recording. I have a D20 off camera as well. I use that all the time. So you can take the 2 notes out of that, record it, don't apply an IR, and boom, direct tone. There's tons of external options for that too. Literally every, like Sir, Oxbox, 2 Notes, Red 7, Saint Rock, like a lot of them. And of course, just play this with your normal amp rig too, if you don't want to get set up to record or anything. Plenty of these guys, like Mike Landau, will play songs that utilize these tones live today, just on a little combo amp. Stereo image is an important part of these tones. They'll often still use 2 amps. But like anything else, what's most important is just loving the music, learning the songs, playing the parts properly, and all the gear we use is just kind of the sauce that we flavor it with. 3, we're going to talk about what you're looking for out of your guitar when doing these sorts of tones. Now today I'm using my Tyler Studio Elite HD, which has individual series parallel switching for each pickup, as well as the Demeter Active Mid-Boost preamp. What do those do? The preamp, if you've ever played like a Music Man with active electronics or most piezo guitars, they always have a buffered output, EMGs as well. It does this really wild thing to the tone. We know what a buffer does. It drives better, it maintains high end, but in the context of recording a guitar, it's almost like in mono, it feels like your guitar's sucked back a little bit and you have a little reverb and it's a little wider. The series parallel is about making your guitar very thin and weak, because if you drive this type of tone too hard, you'll get tons of crazy distortion that sounds really gnarly because there's no cabinet on it. So it's about having a weaker, thinner guitar sound that you're then compressing to go through the amp and the rest of the effects, and you get that big clear tone. Play this on whatever guitar you have, and back in the day people were tracking with plenty of guitars that didn't have this preamp, that didn't have series parallel options. But I would recommend turning your volume knob down a little bit, using a notch position if it's available to you, because you really want a weaker and thinner guitar signal being sent into these kind of tones. Right now, I'm gonna play you some examples. I'm gonna turn the active preamp on and off. I'm gonna switch the pickups from parallel to series and combinations thereof. And you're gonna see how everything doesn't sound quite right until you get to the final formula. Compression, do's and don'ts, and gain staging. So you are generally going to want to have a pretty strongly compressed signal on the input. That's so it's sending a consistent signal into this amp where any peaks will give really gnarly out of control distortion. And you want to compress it afterwards. So you can see how the guitar has a weaker signal, you're boosting it up with compression to cleanly go through this amp that's very delicate. It doesn't want anything weird to happen to it because all that high end will get out of control. And then you compress it afterwards to keep it in place. I will also say about whatever level master distortion you have available on the amp or the plug-in or the model you're using, leave a little bit of grit in. You'll be surprised how even the cleanest of these clean tones like Prince, they have a little bit of distortion on them. They're not bone clean, and it's like distorting a bass. You're not really gonna hear it in the mix, but all those extra harmonics will help you cut through. For the signal path, I want to keep things as simple as possible today and use a limited amount of plugins to demonstrate this to you. We're going into the Nembrini 88 MP1 plugin. This is because I like to compress these tones on the input and the output. In solid state mode on the ADA, the second gain knob that would normally be for the tube stage is compression. So I don't have to run another compressor in front. With a pedal, you could use anything from the super squashy Dynacomp to more modern optical sounding pedals. Exact Tone has a good one, Walrus has a good one. With a plug-in, if you happen to have the real rack gear, people would often use DBXs in front, sometimes even distressors in front. I normally see that used more in the back though. And then we're going out of that with the cabinet turned off into two pieces of rack gear, fake rack gear. It's from the Slate virtual mix rack. First, because again, I like to compress on the output as well. LA2A, tube, optical, super smooth, chop off even more dB than you normally would. And then going into a super simple API, EQ, nothing fancy here. Then this is bust out to different effects that I'm blending in parallel. So these are not series going through each other. These are all 100% wet, mixed back in. Valhalla Vintage Verb for Lexicon voiced hall reverb. Valhalla Delay for some old school digital delay ping pong voices. Soundtoys Microshift, which is the best Eventide pitch detune plugin out there. And that's sort of the baseline, but for the wettest tones, I'm also gonna turn on Overloud's Gem Modula, which has SPX90, like really cool stuff, but on the dimension setting, because it can be important to stack multiple kinds of modulation for this sound. Now let's dive into playing examples. I'm going to play some iconic songs that utilize tones like this in various different pickup positions that I'll put on screen. And then we're gonna go into a full mix of Billy Idol, Flesh for Fantasy. I'm gonna play Steve's clean parts, and I'm gonna turn on and off individual elements of the signal path so you can hear what they're all contributing within a song context. Thank you so much for watching. As I said before, I'm just here to have fun, talk tones, and start a relationship with you guys. I want this to represent a really positive space, you know, down in the comments where we can talk about our love of guitar and different gear and ask questions. The positive response to the last video I uploaded, that's a thing that YouTubers do, they point up into the corner, blew me away, because I just wanted to make that video to share with my friends and talk about tones, and then next thing you know, a couple thousand people saw it and were asking questions and DMing me on Instagram looking for tips. So I might actually try to keep this going. Let me know down below in the comments if there's anything you would like to see from me in the future, just anything we could talk about. Any fun tones, any fun guitar discussions. So have a fantastic day. Catchphrase.